Welcome back to the episode of the BioHub. Today, we're thrilled to welcome Luc Dochez, a biotech leader, entrepreneur, and investor with an exceptional track record of guiding innovative therapeutics from concept to clinic. Luc serves as a managing partner at DROIA Ventures, a specialized venture capital fund focusing on oncology and genetic disease. And prior to joining DROIA, Luc served as CEO of Tusk Therapeutics, an immuno-oncology company developing novel antibody-based therapies to harness the immune system in the fight against cancer, and were later successfully acquired by Roche. Early in his career, Luc held senior leadership roles at Prosensa Therapeutics and TiGenix, where he built a reputation for bridging the gap between cutting-edge science and real-world business strategy. So join us today as we'll talk through the history of DROIA Ventures, the key to raising finance, having been on both sides of the table, and the importance of hiring in early stage startups. So, look, thanks so much for coming on. How are you?
Doing fine. Thank you, Tom. Happy to be here and looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Let's start off with a little bit on Johnny through journey. So you started your career as your career as by training, bit of move element role, TiGenix and TiGenix, before then, the CEO at Avetix Therapeutics. Can you walk us through, and you walk journey at Q&A and key values that you're prepared for as an investor?
Sure, happy to do so. Graduated as a pharmacist, but had no idea what to do next in life. So decided to join a business course, had an additional degree in business economics and an MBA. And then again, as it goes, if you're really uncertain what to do, you become a consultant. So I became a consultant at RTD. And then it's something that kind of is, I think, important in everyone's career. It's about right time, right opportunities, and everything has to come together. So when I joined RTD, it was at the eve of the unraveling of the human genome. And so a lot of activity in the biotech space. Governments, pharma, everybody was, wondering what to do with this, big breakthrough, and where we could sequence the human genome, what new information will we learn? And so they kind of tapped into consultants all over the world. And although I was very, very young and very green, as they say, I was a pharmacist. So I understood the words DNA, RNA, protein, how it worked. And so compared to some of my consultant colleagues, with all due respect, being lawyers and economists, pure sang, I was, although at a young age, thrown into the deep and working on a lot of biotech related cases. And so that's where I started to love biotech venturing. But quickly I realized, I wanted to be in the mat. I wanted to be amongst, the people that do it and not just advise them about how it could go. And so relatively rapidly, after about 2.5 years in consulting, I decided to jump into the deep end and help to start 2 companies. One was TiGenix and one was Metaxas Genomics. And very quickly, TiGenix took off, more rapidly than Metaxas. There were a lot of learnings in that company as well, and we can talk about it later. But at TiGenix, I jokingly say sometimes, quickly became the VP Miscellaneous Affairs. So life in a startup, whatever needed to happen, I helped the CEO. Whether it was structuring the R&D operations, whether it was, building the reporting for the board, helping with fundraising, building the story about the company. And I think that became a quite incredible journey where we went from a 2-person startup to, at the end, I think we had 120 people. Over time, I opened an office in New York, worked closely with a couple of the key potential clients there, the Hospital for Special Surgery in Manhattan. Also, opened for them a GMP cell therapy facility in Memphis, Tennessee, of all places. Good location in terms of logistics for an autologous cell therapy company. Went through A round, B round, C round, Euronext IPO. And so that was, an enormous journey that I went through. And I was lucky to be surrounded by some good people and a good friend who was my mentor, Jill Byen, who was the founder, CEO of TiGenix, who I learned a lot about biotech from him. And so that was a great start. A lot of learnings. And I think one of the key learnings was understand what you end customer wants? That sounds like a very typical logic marketing kind of driven question to ask. But I think sometimes in biotech, we make the mistake, to try to be scientifically perfect. So our founder was a super smart man, was a rheumatologist from training. We developed a academic, I think, perfect and scientifically perfect solution. Unfortunately, we hadn't spent enough time with the end user, which was the orthopedic surgeon, which has a different view than a rheumatologist, a little bit of a shorter term view in my opinion, as well as the patient who, also thinks a little bit more about, what does it bring me tomorrow, not what does it bring me in 20 years from now. And so there was a bit of a mismatch. So when the product finally got approved with, I would say, stellar phase 3 data and a quite relative smooth approval process, we realized that the market uptake was a bit slower and more difficult than we had anticipated just because of this mismatch. And I think having in mind, what do we ultimately bring to the patient with our scientific solution is a lesson that I took throughout the rest of my career. No, this was good. So this was the first kind of venture, but after about 8 years there, I could kind of start a sentence that the CEO could finish, or vice versa. He could start the sentence and I could finish it. I think, although he was a great mentor, it was time to part ways. I wanted to be a successful biotech guy. And the story I kept hearing was, if you want to be that, you got to do at least one big pharma deal, which was hard to do at TiGenix, to be honest, as we decided to commercialize the product ourselves. It was based in reference centers. It didn't build, it didn't need a large infrastructure or sales infrastructure. So I decided to part ways and join Prosensa, which was in those days quite early, fighting against Duchenne, which is a terrible disease, affecting young boys. And I felt, very passionate about what they were trying to do. And that's why I joined them in the Netherlands, and another great learning experience, a board with very seasoned investors, led by Ebbingworth and LSP, joined by others, got to work closely with Steve Bunting, Martijn Kleebeck, had a great CEO coming in, Hans Schikam, with a Genzyme background. And there, you really felt that it's important to listen to patients. What is important to a patient isn't always the same as what, seems important to you and me as being quote unquote healthy person. So that was another great learning experience. Did a large deal with GSK, ultimately went through a NASDAQ IPO with a lot of ups and downs, and then sold the company to BioMarin in 2015. And it's through all these experience, both on the development side, ups and downs, not panicking when you get some data you don't understand, trying to be very transparent about it, but also very, I would say, rational about it, and see ultimately if it still helps patients, can we continue, understanding the real patient need. All of that, I think, was also guiding towards being ready to become a CEO after, the successful exit with Prosensa. It was ready to step up to the end game, I would say, and become a CEO of Tusk Therapeutics. So that's how I ended up there.
So today you're serve as a managing partner at DROIA Ventures. For those who may not be as familiar with DROIA, can you walk us through the history of the firm and how it has evolved over time?
Sure. So DROIA was kind of started as an initiative by Luc Verhelst and Jan Willem Nasus, who are still my partners at DROIA today. Luc was a successful entrepreneur, mostly in the real estate business, but his sister got affected by cancer. And he felt the need, to do something. He managed to build a team around him that could successfully advise her. And, she's still a cancer survivor and doing great today. But Luc also felt the need to kind of see, and he noticed quickly that there was like a gap between initial research and academic research in the cancer field and bringing new therapeutics to market. And so he started his first fund, DROIA, which was purely oncology, focused, and being such a specialist investor was interesting. I got to know them as I became the CEO of Tusk, which was one of their first investments. And although after the exit from Prosensa, I thought I could sit on the beach, I saw the passion with Luc and Jan Willem and the team, and, got also very excited about the opportunity to help cancer patients and see what we can do there. And that's how I kind of got to know them. By the time we exited Tusk and by the sale to Roche, they started their second fund, which was still very oncology focused. And initially I joined as a venture partner, half-time partner, helping in their second oncology fund. Still on the board of two of the portfolio companies there. But also I kept half of my time reserved outside of DROIA to work on companies, new startups that I was working on, to help patients with genetic diseases, rare and genetic diseases. It doesn't always have to be rare, but this genetic background is something that has always inspired me and kind of driven me to help patients with these diseases, as I feel we could kind of come with real therapeutic solutions for them by understanding exactly at the genetic level what is wrong and what can we do about it. And so started Vico Therapeutics, for example, had started Pharvaris, and then got approached by young Willem, who said, you're doing this in the genetic disease. There's a lot of overlap with what we're doing in oncology. A lot of learnings from oncology can be applied to genetic disease. Why don't we build a second sister fund, tap into the existing infrastructure, the investor bases that we already have. And that's how I ended up, being a managing partner at the DROIA Genetic Disease Fund. And now, we also have raised the DROIA 4 fund, which is a combination of genetic and oncology, working with the team. And I think that was an interesting transition for me to move from one side to the other, but certainly has been an interesting experience.
Very good. I think there's a lot of venture funds that describe themselves as hands-on, but DROIA often goes further by incubating companies and taking active board roles within the portfolio. How would you describe DROIA's approach, and what kind of support do you and your team provide once you've invested into a company?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of important nuances here, as we're a specialist investor. So, we focus or on oncology or on genetic disease. So that's already a niche within biotech. We only do therapeutics, so we don't focus on diagnostics or medical devices. So thereby, if you focus on certain areas, you have to try to excel in that. And, you can build a team that is focused just on that specific area of our drug development industry. And so by having people that go deep and go very deep, both at this initial scientific level, I think we can typically show the companies that we truly understand what is happening, that we can kind of also bring experts to the table that can be very relevant. I'm not saying we're exclusive in that, but it's something we just try to do, dig a little bit deeper and go a little bit further than some of our colleagues do. And then on top of that, if we really start companies ourselves, we can bring in also some handy initial support, legal support, financial support, HR support. We even have our own labs, where we can kind of incubate a company if need to be. I think that also is quite unique. And obviously, we can only do as much of those, and we do also a number of typical other investments, but where we don't build a company from scratch and we just join an existing company as a syndicate member. But having that ability, having people that have gone through a few of those exercises is something that I think could be of value add to a lot of companies out there. And then finally, at the board level, we have people like, George Golombasky, who's a seasoned deal maker in oncology, at Celgene in the past, who can take board roles for us. Myself, I've been in the shoes of a CEO, before, and I think also that brings some value add to the table, that we're not only looking at it with our investor hat, but that we've often been on either side of the table as a buy side or a sell side guy as well. I think that also brings some additional expertise to the boardroom, which is helpful for the executive teams at the companies we invest in.
Okay. And I think, so having led operating companies and now investments, you've seen deal making from both sides of the table. What do you think makes for a truly compelling biotech investment opportunity? I know how difficult the market is obviously at the moment, but I guess what makes a compelling opportunity?
Yeah, I think I still focus on the fundamentals, to be honest. And that is, can we truly help patients? Is there truly an unmet medical need? And if, and it's always a big if everything that we kind of hope to achieve pans out, will we really change those patients' lives, and not just marginally? Will it really give them a more or less quote unquote normal life back? And I think whether that's then an asset approach or a platform approach, I want to see some asset finality. I want to understand, what our product could bring to the patient and how it could help in the treatment paradigm for that specific disease. And if that fits, if I believe that that is the case, and that we can really have, if all goes well, have a true impact, that's important. And so with that comes a number of certain, logical things that I think all of us look for. Is there a good model to test this in? How quickly can I get into patients? How is there a biomarker that can predict, long-term benefit to the patients? I think some of these things also are important then as quote unquote a check. But if I can believe that we understand the biology, we understand that if we focus on that biology, bring a drug that addresses really the issue of the disease, and that if that works out and we can make that, that then the patient will have a much better life. I think that's where it all boils down to, and that's what you look for. Whether it's then one asset or more of a platform that leads to an asset, and that we do more of those things, I think that follows thereafter. But it initially starts with me getting excited about truly helping the patients through addressing the root cause of the disease.
Okay. And from your experience, so you've been both raising money as a CEO and now writing checks as an investor. What are the key ingredients that you think will help get a deal done?
Yeah, that's always tough. I said it before. It's a lot of, right time, right moment. And then I say, a lot of luck that you need. The right time, right moment is also important. Are you addressing something where a lot of people have an interest in? And unfortunately, it's sometimes like this in our space. Sometimes things are hot and sometimes they're not. And you got to try to ride the right waves, like a surfer, man. You got to catch the right wave, and that will make you successful. But I think, again, back to the fundamentals, as I said earlier, if you have something that can truly make a difference, and you have a path forward, how you can demonstrate step by step that, it is moving in the right direction, I think that's important. And then also, having a team there, ideally that has done it before, but at least shows the passion and the motivation, and, shows that they can do the right things, will also help to get investors over the finish line. And some days that's easier than other days. And I think, having been in this industry for over 25 years now, we all know that after rain comes sun, and after sun comes rain again. So, there is a cycle that goes up and down. But I think then timing that right, being smart also on what you can do. And I would also say, seeing a company that is very rational about what they do, that is really focused on building value and showing that this is a drug, that has a lot of potential for patients, is important. If it's too quickly, focused on building a too large organization, I think that's not always a good signal in this market. But I think these are just some of the things we can look for. It's hard. Also, it's sometimes more art than pure science, in my view, because some people are just good at raising money and having people to follow them into, the path that they've chosen, where others, with the same data, can't really get there. And this reminds me of a quote from a mentor I had even in my early consulting days, who told me, look, biotech, yes, it's about generating data, but it's as important to have the right story and to know how to tell the story. And I think that's an important nuance as well. And like I said, sometimes that's a little bit more of an art than a science, and it's hard to put your finger on. But it's consistently that some people are, just better at it than others. And you have to find the people, that can do that can tell the story, while obviously, appreciating the data and also generating the data to back their story at the same time.
Yeah. You've worked with many first-time CEOs, and you've obviously been in that seat yourself. What do you think are some of the most important things a first-time biotech CEO needs to know going into that role? And And what do you think differentiates the CEOs that succeed from those that struggle or burn out?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things. On the one hand, surround yourself with the right people and just be humble and listen to advice. And so I got lucky at Tusk. I surrounded myself with some great people like George Golombasky, Terry Rosen, Eric Rowinski, John Maraganori. And so I could tap into their advice, because what I also tell people as the CEO, it's probably one of the most lonesome jobs in the world. Your board want to hear from you when things go right. And, if there is an issue, they want you to come with a solution to the problem, not just share the problem or throw the problem over the fence. On the other hand, you also have to keep your team motivated, and they also look up to you, when things go tough, to provide guidance and to have a solution. So you need some perseverance. You need pretty strong shoulders, to carry some weight. And you got to be convinced that you're working on something that can make a difference. So as a minimum, you got to be very passionate about what you do. And you have to do it just, because you want this to become a drug, or to work on something that could become a drug that helps patients. And if that is not your true motivation, it's tough. But surround yourself with the right people, listen to their advice, but also you have to have, I would say, you have to be brave enough to take decisions and to follow through on decisions, not stubbornly, but people look at you for, you're the captain of the ship. And so even in rocky, water, you have to kind of keep guiding the ship. And so you can ask advice, but ultimately it boils down to you. So you need a little bit of self-confidence as well to make those calls.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think particularly for early stage, I realize so if DROIA is crucial, is visual. What they commonly mistake leaders make when it's trying to build out their team, build out their teams, or help them and try and avoid them.
Yep, I think it's also logic, as a first time CEO or a founder, you're not always, you don't always have that self confidence. So dare to hire people that have more experience, that are even more senior than you, and see them as an ally, not as a potential, threat. I think that's something that people sometimes don't think about. Also, hire people early enough and try to build a strong team spirit early enough. When I was at Prosensa, we had a quite senior C-suite very early on, but that gave us the opportunity when we were in a bit of more rocky water. We were a team that was ready to fight together, that was, ready to and that also already knew each other. We could have, feisty debates amongst us, but once we would go out, whether it was to the board or to outside parties, it was, one front. And I think that's important. That also doesn't happen overnight. I think lastly, for example, hiring a chief medical officer, somebody with the right medical expertise, is also a thing where the board says, we can wait. The trial only starts, a year, 2 years from now. I brought in a chief medical officer very, very early on at Tusk, and his insights were like so valuable to designing, I would say, the program, even the preclinical program, the final nuances to the lead candidate. So I think, again, you have to have the luxury to be able to do that budget wise, but also secondly, as I said before, hire people that are, as smarter as you. And maybe also on top of that, don't always hire people, just because you like them or because they're very alike. Sometimes, people that you feel I can maybe not sit hours at the bar with are, the right colleagues to have, because one and one then truly can be three. And so if you hire too many people that are too alike, and I see that, we want to build a great culture, we want to build a great atmosphere. So we hire at the C-suite all people that are very similar, character-wise and things like that. That's not always that's the easy solution, but not always the best solution to have the optimal outcome. And I think that is also sometimes a mistake I see people make. And so when I go into interviews, it's not only, do I want to spend hours at the bar with this, with this person? It's really more, what do they really bring to the table? And can we really kind of be stronger and smarter together to bring this drug forward? That's what truly counts.
Yeah. I think particularly with how the current market is at the moment, you look at companies that are going down more of a fractional consulting route when bringing C-suite on it. Do you see that often as well within portfolios?
You see it, but it's a little bit of a, there's pros and cons as with, everything always. Sometimes it's okay because if you hire a CMO and it's like too early and there's not enough to do, having somebody sitting there not doing anything in the office, it's not value add. And then but having the input early on could be valuable. So in that case, it would work. On the other hand, as an investor, I want a team that is really focused and committed to this, that wants to have skin in the game and not just, a consultant that comes in and out and moves, between company A, B, and C. You want them to, you commit to the cost because you put a lot of money to work in that company. So I want a team there that is committed as well and also has some skin in the game. So pros and cons. I can see it, and it happens more today than yesterday in this market. But, like I said, pros and cons to it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think recruitment or side of recruitment, sometimes you need a little racer, need the way around and they ready to look for the full exec, Sometimes you see companies, they take you to lead and they just lead and they just try and outsource everything, outsource their learning until time and help. Well, it didn't happen a lot on both sides.
Yeah, I agree, and it's a thin line. And when do you switch, from outsourced capacity capabilities to in-house? Obviously, your social balance, goes up, and so your wind down costs go up. If you build a super large team, certainly depending on the geography you're in, it could be quite expensive. On the other hand, you have to plan a bit for success. So I think it's an exercise. It's a balancing exercise where there's no right or wrong answer to it. I think every case is unique, and it also depends a little bit on the people you find. And if you find the right expertise as a consultant, that's perfectly fine with me. If you find the right expertise and that person really wants to be part of a team and be in-house, then I think you should also be open-minded on there. And I think it's really about bringing the right team together, and whether then they're, quoted as a consultant or as a full-time employee. I think these are details that you have to sort out. It's really about bringing the right expertise to the team, and that really helps to bring the company and hence, the drug that you're trying to develop forward in the fastest, most efficient way. That's what really counts.
Yeah, for sure. Back to you then. After running the therapeutics through therapies, it was literally you ship acquisition and you ship being a biotech CEO, biotech CEO to a full venture investor. How did you find that? How did you find that transition?
Man, that's really going to the dark side, huh? No, it was it's different. It's interesting. You got to see a lot, but I sometimes, jokingly make the comparison. If you're a CEO of a company, it's like being a dad or a mom, and you have one or two kids and they run around, they're your everything. And that's all you care about. But sometimes they go to bed and you have a quiet evening if you're lucky. As an investor, you feel a little bit more, and luckily enough, it's not real life for me yet. I'm not a granddad, but it feels like being a granddad. You got a couple of kids running around that have a lot of grandkids. There's always one of the grandkids in trouble, and you can only indirectly have an impact on them. You can help and you can tell and you can advise people, what you think should be done, but ultimately it's somebody else's decision that has to run with it. And so it's a different feeling. It's interesting. You see a lot, you get involved in a lot, and you can share, some of your insights and your experience and expertise, across much more different drug development programs than you can do as just being a CEO. But you're also a little bit further away from the real action. So I'm still going back and forth to what I like most, but that's, that will always be my internal debate that I will have.
Yeah. Good. And this is a question that we always finish with on the BioHub. I know I wanted to give you a bit of a heads up on this as well. But if you were to have dinner with any three people, past or present, who would it be and why? It doesn't necessarily need to be biotech innovators, although it can be if you like. But yeah, three people you'd like to have dinner with.
Yeah, as I'm a big, foodie lover, I decided I will go for 3 dinners instead of just one with 3 people, if that's fine with you. So first and foremost, I would start always, have dinner with my wife and my kids because, whatever you do in your job, having a good family around you that is supportive, understanding for what you do, and is key. So first and foremost, I would start with that. I'm a business guy, I'm a biotech guy, but first and foremost, I remain a family guy, and I think that's important. Secondly, three people and there's many more that I forget, but three people I looked up to, and I think I had a lot of learnings from, and I had the luxury to have many dinners with them over the years, are, Henry Termeer, who passed away, was the former CEO of Genzyme. He was a mentor. He was a great guy, great insights, how he put the patient first and foremost. Same story goes a little bit for John Crowley, who had his personal story with 2 kids with Pompe. Was a very inspiring guy who he took, I would say, things in his own hands and then built out a great company with, the result of a great drug that could help his kids, but many more kids in the world. And also John Maraganore, who, built Alnylam, over the years, who showed me how persistent you have to be. A lot of ups and downs. We now look upon it as a great success, but there were, dark days as well. And so I think having the chance to sit with those guys around the table once more and, just share stories and trying to show them a little bit what I've learned from them would be fantastic. So again, great people that I think are very inspiring and have been very inspiring to me in building my career and helping me make some choices that I made both as a C-suite guy and as an investor. So that would be one. And then maybe lastly, I don't know who I would invite to dinner, but some of the decision makers out there, some of the politicians, because I still feel that we're doing such an important job in biotech, and I sometimes feel that we're really misunderstood. And so trying to find the right people there and just from the heart share what we're trying to do, that this is really about helping people, and that, accommodating that should be a focus and not trying to make this more difficult than it already is. So that would be probably the 3 dinners that I thought of for to answer this question, Tom.
Yeah, very good. Well, I loved all of those answers, and really enjoyed listening to your perspective just of your journey through the field and some of the advice you've given to first-time CEOs, a run through DROIA. I think that was amazing. So yeah, look, thanks so much for coming on and helping us out with this. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Same for me. Always a pleasure to, share my 2 cents. And it's not more than that, but, every little bit that helps in bringing a new drug to market and to patients is what, why I get out of that. And that's why I still, love what I do every day. So thanks for that, Tom. And thanks for giving me the chance to share this with you and your audience today.